Female Finance Collective, where we encourage women to have open and honest conversations about money. Today, we're going to continue on our financial literacy series. In this episode, we're going to share foundational skills of financial literacy and why those foundational skills are so important. All of the Female Finance Collective episodes are about financial literacy, but in this series, we just want to get really clear about the different stages that you go through as you progress through the financial literacy sort of process. Personal finances are highly personal, and there are many aspects to consider. So just like always, we're sharing information and education for conversational purposes, and we're not here to give any specific advice. We just want to share our ideas and what works for us and kind of things that we've learned through our personal experiences. So as a foundation builder, which is kind of like the first step that you take in financial literacy, a big piece of that is that mindset shift where you kind of realize, okay, it's time for me to make a change. I really need to learn and understand some things about my money and my finances and what I've got going on here. So what would you guys recommend is kind of the first step you take once you get that mindset shift?
Yeah, I think about really starting to think about and understand what money you have coming in and what money you have going out, right? It's really hard to get started on a financial journey if you don't know the numbers. And I know it can be super scary, and I know that holds a lot of people back from making that mindset shift and decision to start looking at their money. But I promise you, if you just start paying attention to and writing down, either on a document or, a notepad, what's coming in and what's going out, you will start to see and make some decisions and make yourself almost move forward rather than stay frozen.
I love that as a first step, just getting clear on, what your income is, what your debts are, and just starting to just pay a little more attention to your finances. I find when I'm working with clients, there's something that happens on the mindset front. And often we feel like we were never taught finance, and it's tough to understand where to start from. And for me, financial literacy is sort of like learning a new language or learning how to play an instrument. So my son's actually started to play an instrument, and I've seen him struggle over the past few months. He does weekly lessons, and each week he improves a little bit more, and he understands a little bit more. And one of the ways I find for people to just start connecting with their finances, if it feels really overwhelming to get started, is to just think about how you're feeling when you make purchases and start to notice some patterns. Is what you're buying out of habit? Is what you're purchasing because you're feeling upset that day or you're stressed? And start to realize that avoiding finances is very common, and it does create a lot of stress in your life that you might not notice, but it does happen in the background. So just kind of getting your mindset on side with taking that look at your finances and getting really clear on your income, your debt, if you're saving, and what your expenses look like month to month.
I think that's so important. That habit thing is so important. One thing that I was thinking about the other day was when is there like a time of day or a time of month when someone is really spending the most? Are they like scrolling their phone kind of thoughtlessly in the evening when they're winding down and making like kind of like impulsive purchases of things that pop up when they're just kind of trying to relax and unwind and they're not really thinking about it? Is there like a week of the month that's particularly stressful at work and they realize they're like spending more that month? Is there a time when they're ordering out every day instead of cooking food? Like I sometimes think that even laying it out, like looking on a calendar, like the days that you're spending could be really telling. And then I know it's crazy to like, I'm not suggesting you like get your receipts out and look at the time of day that you're charging things, but you can kind of just think about it. Man, do I just sort of order everything at night I had a friend who used to just scroll her phone at night in bed, and she called it like sleep shopping because she'd be like half asleep and she would order things and they would come to her house and she didn't even really remember ordering them. So, just kind of like noticing those types of things so that you can change those habits. That mindfulness, I think, is a huge piece of it. So then once people have an understanding of the money going in and out and they've looked for those patterns, I think we all agree that kind of the next step that makes the most sense is to create a budget and think about like a spending plan and even a savings plan. Like, how much money do you have coming in, going out? Where's that money going? How much are you spending? And then how much are you saving? So what do you guys think is, like, what's the best way for someone who's never created a budget to go about that? Are there like some quick steps that we can share that help them get started?
So I was thinking what you were just saying, Jen, about timing of our spending too, and then creating a budget. I think no matter how you want to create a budget, there's lots of ways to do it. Paying attention to that timing is a piece we want to hold on to as well, because I know a lot of people spend a lot of money right when they get paid, right? So this big chunk of money comes into your bank account. You know what payday is for many people that have a salary job. And then then and there, you feel like you have money, and a lot of people spend, right? So I think that timing is a big piece of budgeting as well. And kind of once you start to track your expenses, whether it's on a Google Sheet, for example, or it's in an app is another way you can track your expenses, or it's on paper and pencil. I have a money journal. I actually don't have it here with me right now, but I have a money journal that I like to capture a lot of my money and thinking about money offline as well. So there's a lot of ways you can do it, and really you need to find the one that's right for you, right? But to create a budget, you need to know what's coming in and what's going out. And so if it's each transaction by transaction you're recording to really get that grasp, and then thinking about what categories, right, your spending's going into. How much are we spending in utilities? How much am I spending in fun? How much am I saving, right? And so that's just kind of my advice, is to try out some different budgeting techniques. Give them a little chance though, and then see what might work for you.
I find that too, that's great advice. And I want to mention, as adults, we fear failure. It always feels like we need to have the perfect solution to anything that's happening in our life. And with finances, it's guaranteed that you will make mistakes, that you will fail from time to time. And that's okay as long as you're taking steps and you're headed in the right direction. And there is no perfect way to create a budget, because everyone is different. We all have different lives. Some of us are busier than others. And sometimes the easiest way to get started, I know that when I really decided to get serious about my money, I started with pen and paper. I just put it down in a notebook. It took a little bit of time to do that detective work to figure out what subscriptions do I have, and those weirdo bills that aren't on a regular monthly schedule. They are, quarterly or once a year. So I just had a notebook and I just started with that. And for my brain, that connection between my brain and tactically writing something down worked very well. And then I shifted to a spreadsheet. And then I've played around a little bit with things like some of the personal finance apps, but there is no right or wrong way to do it. The key is really just to try it out. And get into a consistent habit of looking at that budget or spending plan.
I think so much of what both of you said is really important. And one thing I want to highlight is that when you're starting something new, like tracking your spending and creating a budget, don't overcomplicate it by using an app that you've never used before. Like if at some point you had an app that you used for budgeting or spending or whatever, and you're like, you know what, I haven't been doing this forever. Let me open this back up and get started. I think that an app is a great tool for a beginner if you already have some experience with it, but don't try to take on too much at once. So there are some awesome apps and sites and everything that are great, but at the beginning, there is no shame in paper and pencil or a basic spreadsheet that just has columns and rows. Like it doesn't have to be fancy. That is a really good way to get started because you're not trying to learn something new while you're starting this new habit. You're just keeping it really basic. Then once you have a handle on it, that's when you can do kind of what Marilee said was like experiment with some different options and see if there's something that works better for you. And Sybil referenced like an app that she uses. There are a ton of really cool tools that can do a lot more for you once you have the basics down. So keep those in the back of your mind for like kind of like our next episode when we're going to talk about the kind of the next level of financial literacy. But at the beginning, don't feel like, oh, if I'm not using some fancy tool that I'm not doing it right. Like there is literally no way to do it wrong as long as you're keeping track of your income and the money going out. That's really the key here. So don't overcomplicate it, I think, because it goes back to that failure piece, right? If you're like, well, I forgot to put it in the app for 3 days. Well, now it's wrecked, and then you have that tendency to like wipe it all away. It's like when you eat ice cream on the second day of like your healthy eating plan. It's not ruined. You're just going to keep moving.
I was thinking the exact same thing. So what if somebody wanted to just start writing these things down? What might they want to include? I think they would want to include dates, right? So a date column of what day the income's coming in or what day the expense is going out. And then maybe start helping themselves, besides writing just the expense and the amount or the income and the amount, also starting to think about that category piece. And the reason I would start thinking about the category piece from the beginning is because that's the piece that's going to help you later as you have this habit of budgeting and of tracking your expenses. The category piece is going to help you later make some decisions about, I spend a lot in this area. Is there a way to spend less? Or, oh, wow, I really am ready to up my savings a little bit more. Where am I going to take that money from? Or do I need to make a little bit more money, right? So I would really consider trying to categorize your income and expenses from the beginning as well, to set yourself up to see those categories. Because it's hard to be like every $5 purchase. It's hard for us to conceptualize how much we're really spending in a certain category, like a fun category or eating out category, right? But once we start putting next to that dining out restaurants and we start to see restaurants come up over and over, we could quickly calculate restaurants and be like, I'm spending how much a month on restaurants, right? And eating out. So that's one piece of advice. I love the idea of doing it pencil paper first, if that's best for you, but I would go ahead and do that step of categorizing as well.
All right. So now we talked about kind of what we think is the first, you have that mindset shift. Now we're like, okay, you got to start writing down your spending, writing down how much you have coming in, thinking about your budget and how much money you're putting towards savings. And then you also want to think about your debt, how much money you're paying towards your debt, how much you owe. And we did a whole series on debt. So please go back and listen to those episodes. If you are not sure where to get started, we talk about how to create a payoff plan and how to kind of set all of that up. But your debts and your payments towards those debts are also a really big piece of that kind of mindset shift and then getting everything organized into a budget or a spending plan. And we also really encourage everybody to have an emergency fund, or you can call it a contingency fund or a backup fund or whatever you want to call it, but just a pot of money that you have in case an unexpected expense comes up, whether that's medical, your refrigerator goes out, whatever it is, you have this pool of money set aside so that you don't have to access more debt to pay for things. Or the other reason I think it's really important is like that mental health stress piece, because I used to really stress and feel overwhelmed all the time. Like, what if my car broke down? What if my furnace went out? I had an old furnace in the townhouse I owned, and I just kept waiting for my furnace to break. And I was like, how am I going to pay for that? So if I would have had this fund set aside, I could have accessed that money. So we recommend just getting started. And we've talked about this in other episodes as well. So if you want to like listen for that, even if you're putting $5 a month towards that fund, just start that process. As a beginner, we're not saying you better get that 6 months set up immediately, but just thinking about setting that up and putting that money aside. Those are kind of those big budgeting pieces that we want you to think about. So the next kind of piece of financial literacy for beginners or kind of information builders, setting that foundation piece, is to build habits of learning and building confidence when it comes to money. So I have some things I like to do that I did to build my confidence and kind of knowledge base around money. Do you guys have any that you think are good tips for beginners who are just kind of building that foundation around finances? So one tip I have is that there are a ton of great podcasts out there that you can just, not just ours, right? We have a lot of information. There are a ton of podcasts. You can search any specific topic that you're looking for and just kind of listen and learn about money. Another one I really like is I have talked about this numerous times because I really like the resource NerdWallet. It's a website. If you have a question, if you hear a term that you don't know, if you're like, okay, today I just want to learn something, like go to that website and just scroll and read. They have tons of articles. A lot of them are really short. They're really approachable and user-friendly. So that's another good way to just learn some information. The more you learn, the more confident you're going to feel.
I would say to YouTube. Go to YouTube and search up money or budgeting or, getting started. There's so many great people on YouTube sharing really great ideas, and you can get a feel, just like this podcast, for the person and follow along with what they have to share as well. And then the other one is books. Books, there's a wealth of information in financial books. A book got me started on my financial journey, and there's books for, every step of a financial journey. So definitely learning and building that habit of learning. I have about 60 minutes a week I spend for sure on money every Friday. And a part of that is always learning. Because then when I do some learning, I can spend that time also tracking. I can spend that time also, making some decisions. But there's always more to learn. Once you learn a little bit, it gets kind of addictive. And so I would definitely build that habit of learning into some of your money time. Build that habit of listening to this podcast every week for 30 minutes of that hour a week. Your financial literacy skills will grow exponentially once you start. If you do 30 minutes to an hour of learning about money a week, you will know so much about money and understand money so differently very, very quickly.
Yeah, for me, the number one tip I give people is to ask questions. So if you're meeting with a financial professional, or even if you're having a conversation with a friend about finances, if there's something that you don't understand, just ask a question. And because I do find it, especially with conversations with financial professionals, people shy away from asking if they don't understand something. But it's sort of the easiest way to learn is to ask a question in the moment. And sometimes a powerful question can be, is there a question I should have asked you but didn't? And then the professional can weigh in on something. They'll always have something to say. So it's a great way to continue learning just by asking questions. I mean, you think of kids ask a bazillion questions. So if you are just new to building that foundation for your finances, questions will give you so much information and help you to make progress faster.
I completely agree, Marilee. Questions have gotten me so many amazing places. I love to ask questions, and they lead you into places. Another sentence starter with a professional is, I'm a beginner at budgeting. What do you recommend? I'm a beginner. I don't know anything about, right? So you're really telling that person, I need to know the foundational pieces of this, right? And that's how we build conceptual understanding, which is what we really need to do here. Rather than just understanding how the skills of how to do certain things, we want to understand the concept behind it. So when we say we're a beginner at something, somebody's going to give us really good foundational understanding, which will help us build our conceptual understanding of that concept.
And do exactly what we talk about in this podcast. Have open conversations with other women. Sit down with your friend for coffee and say, all right, I'm laying this out on the table. I had this mindset shift. I've started paying attention to my money. I have some questions. Like, do you have a budget? How do you set your budget up? What do you do to track your spending? Like, start just talking with other women, with your friends, with family members about how they manage their money as well. That is a huge piece of why we started all of this, is because we want women to get comfortable talking about it. It's just been taboo for so many people for so long that we're all just like, this is maybe slight exaggeration, but not for everybody, but it's almost like we're just suffering in silence, like in our own little financial hole, like not knowing what to do or who to ask or what to say. We don't want to admit we're struggling because that's also kind of a woman thing. A lot of times we want to seem strong, like we have it all together, but guess what? We don't, right? Like very few women have it all together. So opening up and conversing with other women about this topic is a great way to also learn from each other. And then once you start gaining that knowledge and that comfort level of asking questions, of listening to other people, of reading books, learning, whatever, that's when those money decisions are going to be a little bit easier for you. That's when you'll be able to look back and say, okay, you know what? I'm going to change the way I'm tracking my spending and the way I have my budget set up because that's not working for me. I've learned some stuff and now I have a better idea of how I want to set it up. So can you guys think of some other money decisions that you started to make when you were kind of beginners and your foundation started to build and then you started to get that confidence? I remember starting to be like, now I'm a little dangerous. I have a little confidence when it comes to my finances. So I did start making decisions where in the past I'd really been frozen and kind of stuck and I didn't know what to do next.
What I find is when you start building that foundation, at the beginning, you're making decisions that are almost day-by-day decisions. Like you're making purchases at the grocery store, you're paying your debt payments, you're looking at what's coming due in that month. As you build your skills, you start to make decisions that are more future-oriented. So you're starting to look ahead. You're looking at, well, what's on the horizon over the next couple of months? Do I have summer camps to pay for? Whose birthday is it? 2 months from now. You're starting to look ahead in the calendar and realize that your finances need a bit of a longer-term plan. So that's what I kind of saw from the decision-making perspective. Is it was no longer living like that paycheck to paycheck cycle. It was building out a longer-term perspective and time frame and making decisions that were for today me, but also for future me, and kind of starting to think longer term.
Yeah, exactly, Marilee. What comes to mind for me, Jen, is my first decision to fund an emergency fund. I did not have an emergency fund at all, but when I really started becoming financially literate, that was one of the first things I decided to do. And exactly, Marilee, that was having empathy for my future self. That was looking forward. I hadn't realized that I needed to look forward in that way. I might need some cash on hand if something happened. And so for me, that was my big decision that I decided to make when I started learning intentionally about money. And it was the first decision I made for my future self.
I think that what you guys are saying in different ways is this is like a form of self-care, right? Because if you're putting in the time to take care of your finances, manage your money, you are helping manage future stress. You are helping manage future fun. You are helping manage all of these things that can come your way if you have confidence in managing your finances, taking care of yourself, and taking care of the things that are going to come up, right? Because money whether you love money or hate money or aren't really sure how to feel about it, like money funds everything, right? It's how we keep a roof over our head. It's how we go on vacation. It's how we enjoy a coffee with our friends. It's how we put food on the table. It's how we do everything. So once you make that mindset shift to kind of get a handle on your money and start really managing it and start gaining confidence, that is when everything changes. Honestly, and that may sound like an exaggeration for some people, but it is really where everything started to change for me. I was like, oh, I just paid for something without freaking out about it, right? Without feeling nervous or overwhelmed or anxiety, and I started planning for things, whereas before I was never financially planning for anything. And it was just a huge shift for me. And so I think these foundational people, if you are here today and you're listening and you're a foundational money builder, I'm so excited for you because that's when everything starts to get so much better and so much more exciting and fun and less stressful. Do you guys, anything you want to
So true.
before we wrap it up?
The two truths I think of is one is like no one is born with this knowledge. So everyone has to go through these foundational steps to learn. And the second thing is life is so much easier when you have a handle on your finances and a good relationship with money. It will help to improve your life. Money touches all parts of your life. And, it's one of those things that it is such a powerful skill to have in your life. So we're wrapping up today for this series on financial literacy. And remember, we would love to hear from you. So if you have questions, thoughts, or comments, please send them our way and subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss the future episodes. We're really looking forward to seeing you next time.